On.
The time being 6:30, we'll call to order the January 10th, 2018 public hearing of the Tilton Planning Board. Okay, we have 5-6 amendments to go over. Thanks. All right, we'll read each amendment and then we'll ask for public input on each one, and then the board will discuss each one. Are you in favor of the adoption of amendment number 2? Yes. Just make sure. As proposed by the planning board for the town zoning ordinance as follows. Amend Articles 2 and 6 to define self-storage facilities and to designate that such uses shall be permitted in the regional commercial, general commercial, and industrial districts, and allow through special exception in the mixed-use and resort commercial districts. Add to Article 2 definitions the following term: self-storage facility, a building or group of buildings in a controlled and fenced compound that contain varying sizes of individual compartmentalized and controlled access stalls or lockers for the storage of customers' goods or wares. Add to Article 6.1E a line titled self-storage facilities and designate that such uses are permitted in RC, GC, IN, allowed by special exception in MURC, and not permitted in DN, MR, VR, and RA. Do we have any public comment on that? Yes, Mr. Mitchell.
My question is, are those like large tractor trailers and things that Tilton Trailer Rentals leases out, are those considered in this category, or are those because, I mean, I know that a lot of them are people who have those in there sitting in their yards, have been there for years, and others are just temporary.
This is for when somebody comes and wants to do a self-storage facility, like Tilton Trailer, like My Box, like U-Haul. This is the definition for that. This doesn't have anything to do with them on their own land.
So it would be more like the proposed one for down by, next to Hannaford's?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Does the board have any discussion on that one? Yes, Doug.
Just based on some discussion that among the board previously, I thought maybe you might want to consider changing where it says group of buildings in a controlled and fenced compound to in a controlled or fenced compound. You know, there might be a place that's controlled and not fenced, but it's, you know, it's otherwise obstructed, and that the intent would still be for it to fall under this definition.
What does everybody think?
And or.
That would probably make it clearer in the future.
Could we have a motion to that effect? Sure. I'll make a motion
Oh.
that.
Sorry, I see a
Oops, I'm
hand.
sorry.
You should do it after.
I find controlled to be very vague. Fenced, I can understand. Controlled,
Controlled access. Means there's gonna be probably like,
so you don't have a fence and you can see everything in there, but it's controlled. Because you have
it's
to go
controlled
outside.
access. It's two words together. So it's telling you that the access to the building is going to have probably a gate or something like that they can lock when people leave, like U-Haul does? Is that, am I
But I'm
reading it right?
wondering, and this is great because we get tripped up on our definitions, which is why we're working on them. So if people have varying definitions now, do we need to tighten that up so
Yeah.
that what we say is, well, what we meant back in 2018 was, and then we find
Yeah.
out that it's a different board with a different interpretation.
Clear is better.
Well, the first part does talk about the compound, which is simply controlled and fenced. So,
Okay.
what kind of control? The second part, as you were talking about, talks about controlled access stalls or lockers for the storage of customer goods or wares. That's pretty well covered. But the compound itself, the
Yeah,
entire
yeah.
unit,
Yeah.
so.
I was looking at the wrong one. Excuse me, Derek.
Yeah, maybe if we simply said, or simply said in a fenced and/or controlled access compound. So that you're adding clarity to the control. It's not just controlled in any way, it's controlled access.
Yes,
I can't help myself.
that's okay.
I think it depends on what you want. If you want it to be controlled and fenced, it would seem to me it's up to the board to decide whether it wants this kind of facility to have both of those features. Or not. I mean, is the fence important?
It's defining it, it's not requiring it. This is a definition, not a regular, it's not an article of the, but, yeah.
Well, how would you control it without fencing it? How else are you imagining?
Maybe because of the landform, like the new MyBox facility, for example, kind of, the sides are very sloped, and they might say, well, we don't want to have a fence there. And of course, yes, it's in the regulations, they have to have a fence, or that's what's negotiated through site plan review, that's a different story, but we're just dealing with the definition right now. But anyway, yeah, that might be another way of, their fence,
Well, the structure serves
a
as a
moat.
fence.
First time I ever
Well, we
looked
can't
at
just
that.
have fence because that could be an open area, I guess. Fenced. You have to have more verbiage in this fenced. So fenced and or, so they happy with that?
And/or controlled access.
Yeah.
We should make a motion to, yeah.
Controlled access.
It's plain
No, and fenced or fenced.
Yeah, because that gives the ability.
If you put controlled access compound, isn't fence just one type of control?
Good point.
A natural barrier could be a moat, could be do you know what I mean?
With boulders all the way around the edge
or
of it.
access. It's hard to describe it because it's just.
Chairman, do you have someone from the public that wishes to speak?
Yes.
I think you would be better to make sure that whatever it is totally clear so that if someone who is voting doesn't understand it, that they might reject it just because they don't understand what controlled access means. Yeah, but the controlled access too, the whole thing, I think the word controlled is kind of nebulous to those who aren't familiar with how you handle things when you were talking about them, that's all. So if it requires a slight adjustment, I think it would benefit everyone.
Yes.
And you could put such as, but not limited to.
Could you simplify it with just putting the word gate in there somewhere? Not? Could you use the word lock?
So control access means a security measure is put in place to control the people who have access to the, whatever, the building or facility. So that's what controlled access means. There's a security measure put in place.
Just seems like locks,
Does that
the
help?
word lock or gate is clearer to the general public as to what type of control it is.
So the planning board would have the final say on to what type of control that would be. So we didn't describe it here, but you could put controlled access compound, such as fences, gates,
Gated-
natural barriers,
gated access.
such as but not limited to. So you could give them an example, but I don't think it's necessary because the planning board has the ultimate say as to what that control will be.
Yes.
My concern was never about the controlled access. The first sentence where it says that buildings will be in a controlled fenced compound. Now, if you have a gate, that may cover one little tiny part of the compound. I'm thinking about the whole shebang.
So, could you repeat that? I'm sorry. Because now that I've reread it, now I want to hear you
No,
too.
I I'm just thinking about the entire property. The building or group of buildings is in a compound.
Right.
And it says right now that it'll be controlled and fenced. And I like that, even though controlled is vague. But if we take control out, then they could have a little dinky fence in the front.
I don't think we were talking about taking control out.
We were talking about changing it to in a fenced and/or controlled access.
Compound.
But a fence is just one of many types of controls.
Right. Yes.
I just want to repeat, this is a definition, not a, it's not establishing how they shall be. That's established elsewhere.
It's
Yeah,
just to
a
give people an
basic,
idea when they
just a
come
basic
in.
definition,
I mean,
yeah.
it does seem to me that, if I may, Catherine's buildings in a controlled access compound was fairly clear.
You want me to read the definition? Wikipedia. Self-storage.
Do you have any other input? Anything to add, Eric?
Yeah, I think it's fine because it's just a basic definition for the
Yeah,
use
for
of,
the-
we have
for
to
the
define
inlet.
it somehow.
Right.
New definitions.
Do you have a reading of the inferior?
Would you like to make a motion?
Well, I want to hear, I know she was writing things down. I only flip-flopped in a fenced and controlled access compound.
That's what I did. And/or.
And/or.
Yeah. I would say controlled access and or fence, I mean, if I was going to change it.
Yeah.
Yeah, whichever way it says the
However it
same thing.
works.
So as long as we have a definition to work with.
All right.
Madam Chair, I have to go to my next meeting.
Enjoy yourself.
You're, you still going?
Yes, we do. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Have fun.
So, we read make a motion to change Amendment 1, the definition, self-storage facility, a building or group of buildings in a fenced and or controlled access compound that contains varying sizes of individual compartmentalized, can't say that, and controlled access stalls or lockers for the storage of customers' goods or wares.
Second.
Yes.
Maybe eliminate the need for a second motion if you modified your motion slightly to say that I recommend for the, this to be the final form to go on the ballot. That's sort of what we're working toward.
Motion to, or amend my motion to make it for the ballot.
Final.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Amendment 1 is ready for the ballot. 2, are you in favor of the adoption of amendment number 3 as proposed by the planning board to the town zoning ordinance as follows? Amend Article 3 to establish that the requirements of the parking provisions table shall not apply to the downtown district. Replace the first paragraph of Article 3.5 with the following. Except in the downtown district, off-street parking shall be provided as enumerated in the following table. Prior to approval of any new use, change of use, or expansion of use in the downtown district, the planning board and/or code enforcement officer may require verification that existing public parking will provide adequate parking accommodations. Anybody?
Do you want to do?
I figured they all have
I know.
that. Do you all have the reason for the change? sure everybody's on the same page. Is there any? Make sure everyone's at time. I don't want to interrupt anybody. Okay, we have a motion to approve.
I make a motion to make this amendment number 2, the verbiage on here, for the warrant at town meeting as it stands.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Are you in favor of the adoption of amendment number 4 as proposed by the planning board for the town zoning ordinance as follows? Amend Article 3 to establish a floor area-based parking density requirement for shopping centers over 60,000 square feet. Add to Article 2 the definitions the following term. Shopping center, a building or group of buildings containing 2 or more retail, service, or restaurant businesses interconnected by corridors or ways separate from the public highway system. Add the following to Table 3.5. Use, shopping centers over 60,000 square feet floor area. Required provision for off-street parking, 4.5 spaces per 1,000 square feet floor area.
I just have a quick question.
Yes.
I'm just catching on to this now. This says amendment number 4, should it be amendment number 3?
Yeah, my fault, sorry. When you guys dropped the,
First one, everything else.
Yeah.
Now, do we have to choose option 1 or 2?
I think at the last meeting you settled in on option 1,
Correct.
yeah.
Okay.
But, you know,
Wait, do we have any public comment on parking?
I just don't know what's left to develop that hasn't already been in the planning stages that this would impact. I'm assuming this would not impact the piece of property across from Chili's.
It would not.
No.
That won't be a big enough.
Thank you.
That won't be 60,000.
Okay, so I will make a motion to place amendment number 3 on the warrant for vote at town meeting.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained?
I had changed this to 4, too, so it's but I'm going to be off one.
Are you in favor of the adoption of amendment number 4 as proposed by the planning board for the town zoning ordinance as follows? Amend Article 6 to separate apartment and condominium uses from multifamily uses and to designate that apartment and condominium uses shall be permitted in the village residential, mixed use, and downtown districts, not permitted in all other districts, and that multifamily uses shall only be permitted in the downtown district. Separate Article 6.1.A2, apartments, condominiums, multifamily, into 2 lines, one for apartments and condominiums and other for multifamily, and designate that apartment and condominium uses shall be permitted in the VRMU-DN districts, not permitted in all other districts, and that multifamily uses shall only be permitted in the VN district. change, the chart of permitted uses indicates apartments, condominiums, and multifamily uses are permitted in the MUVR districts. However, the table of dimensional values sets that dwelling unit density at a maximum of 2 units per lot for both zones. The zoning ordinance defines multifamily as housing for 3 or more families. Thus, one chart is telling citizens multifamily is allowed, while the other chart is limiting density to the extent that multifamily is not allowed. The proposed changes bring conformity between the two tables by adopting the more restrictive application of existing standards. I just don't want to leave anybody out if they want to say something.
A little dry.
Board, have any
That's pretty
discussion
straightforward.
on it?
Yeah.
Make a motion to approve amendment number 4 as written for the ballot.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? And where's the petition warrant article?
Well, that's, you have page 5 and 6, are you missing a page? There's 5, and then the petition one is number 6.
This one, we still got one more down.
Couldn't get that.
Bottom on the left.
Squeeze them. Where am I? Taking the papers?
I
I
don't
don't have
know.
5 either. You didn't give them to me yet, right? Thank you. Yeah, my papers were done. Jesus.
Just give me that line
I can't do it.
6.
I need your six.
I got one here. Yeah, keep that one. and then-
Okay, amendment number 5. Are you in favor of the adoption of amendment 6 as proposed by the...
Amendment 5.
That's right, we have to back down everything.
6 is right, though.
As proposed by the planning board for the town zoning ordinance as follows. Amend Article 10 to clarify when a certificate of occupancy is required and to establish that all projects requiring a construction permit shall also require a certificate of inspection. Replace the first paragraph of Article 10.4 with the following paragraphs. 10.4 Certificates and registrations. 10.4.1 Certificate of occupancy. After 5/1/1999, all new residential and commercial structures shall receive a certificate of occupancy issued by the town of Tilton prior to any use of said structures. A certificate of occupancy issued by the town of Tilton shall be required whenever a new building is constructed, a building certified for one use is converted to another use, occupancy of a commercial or industrial building changes, or ownership of a commercial, industrial, or multifamily residential structure changes. In order to secure a certificate of occupancy, a structure must be found in compliance with all applicable requirements of this zoning ordinance, approved site plans, stipulations of local land use boards, and applicable state laws and regulations. All structures must be completed as approved in applicable building permits. No new structures will be used or occupied without obtaining a certificate of occupancy. Failure to obtain a certificate of occupancy will constitute a violation of the zoning ordinance. 10.4.2 Certificate of inspection. Any renovation, alteration, or improvement that does not require a certificate of occupancy, but which does require a building permit, shall receive a certificate of inspection issued by the town of Tilton to document final project approval. Failure to obtain a certificate of inspection will constitute a violation of the zoning ordinance and may result in the suspension of a certificate of occupancy. Assign an article number of 10.4.3 to the last paragraph of Article 10.4, business registration. Why the change? It is presently unclear whether a certificate of occupancy is required. By clarifying that the CO requirement and addressing all other permitted projects with a certificate of inspection, it is established that every permitted project must be closed out by the code enforcement officer. Yes.
Does the town or code enforcement officer have like a comprehensive checklist of things that are required, not just simply by town ordinance? Because, I mean, There's a lot that goes on, whether it's new construction or renovation. And to just simply say, yes, you pass, that seems a little nebulous, but if there is a checklist and everything has been gone through and totally documented, that everything is all in order, then I certainly would support this.
One moment.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't think such a checklist exists. So.
Oh, I thought you had a follow-up.
No,
I have a question.
Yes.
Does this mean that someone buying an existing business, multifamily dwelling, that's been there for years and years and years, that he has to now bring everything up to compliance that has changed since that building's been there?
I can't speak to exactly, all the specifics of the codes. I can tell you the requirement that, just want to pull it up here. I believe that requirement is already on the books. Any new business moving into existing commercial structure shall require a certificate of occupancy. It doesn't mention multifamily there.
But this one does. Ownership of
Yes,
a commercial,
right.
industrial, multifamily
Right,
structure
right.
changes.
No, I understand. I'm just saying it used to be there. So I'm afraid so your question was, are they going to have to completely renovate the building to accommodate all building codes? My understanding is that there's building codes specific to, it's not renovation, but rehabilitation or something like that does allow for, certain, like let's say the rise and the run of the stairs are not exactly what they should be. My understanding from talking with Al, our code enforcement officer, and Tim Joubert, the fire inspector, is that there are allowances for things like that, but I really can't speak in depth on it.
I just think for a new potential buyer of an existing business, sure could get into a rat's nest of what has to be, and it's not clearly defined by this, as to what has to be updated.
Yeah. But I will, again, the business aspect of it is already on the books.
Yeah, but that could put quite an onus on the buyer and seller in multifamilies. That's quite a, because if we're sitting here saying it's our opinion that that's how it would go forth, but if there's no particular checklist to make that concrete, again, it goes back to it's nebulous, that it's too unclear as to. That's Joe Jessamine.
How you doing?
Good.
Well, I suppose the board we could remove multifamily, ownership of a commercial and industrial residential structure changes. Multifamily, with the housing standards program in place, multifamily structures are being inspected that way anyway. So maybe the board would want to pull multifamily off of that.
question?
Yes.
In the other local requirements, and I don't know the answer, that's why I'm asking, are there anything in multifamily buildings about fire suppression? As example, new buildings being constructed versus somebody who's purchasing an older building that doesn't have a sprinkler system inside, doesn't have fire detectors inside, carbon monoxide detectors inside. I don't know that I would want to see multifamily buildings excluded from having to meet a more stricter code if someone were to pass it off and sell it to somebody. I think all those codes should be enforced.
take out multifamily.
Does Al have like a list of multifamilies that he checks so many a year, trying to make sure getting them up to code?
Well, I don't know that he's got a list of necessarily that folks that he's working with, that are sort of not up to code that he's got, but I know that, again, through the housing standards program that was adopted at last year's town meeting, all rental properties are being inspected on the ordinance establishes as a 3-year cycle. So they're being inspected every 3 years according to the program, so there's that.
This implies that the ownership, that when the ownership changes, it triggers the need for a certificate of occupancy. How does that work? Because I can understand like a new building is construction. Obviously, if a new building is constructed, the code enforcement officer is going to be involved in that process. And then certified for one use converted to another, he's going to be involved in that process, correct? But how is he going to be involved when a title changes?
Well,
Just from the deed? From the town gets a copy of the new owner on the deed?
I mean, how's he gonna know?
How's he going to know that the ownership has changed on this multifamily residential structure?
Well, I mean, the deeds do go through the land use office, so we have that. And it's on the books now, so, it's sort of a requirement. The onus technically is on the purchaser to follow the zoning ordinance and come in and seek that certificate of occupancy. But certainly Al's
Okay.
aware of what's going on out there, and he helps people comply.
So when they change ownership, they should come in and talk to the code enforcement and say, so he's going to go out and inspect the property?
Yeah.
What if they never come in?
Then they're in violation of the zoning ordinance, and again, if we were to become aware of it, Al would contact them and bring them into compliance. Potentially they'd be subject to violations, but certainly there'd be an effort made to get them.
Is that something Al's going to do, is review all the property transfers and go out and visit these people?
Well, I mean, no, I don't think he's going to have it as part of his weekly regimen necessarily, that he goes through all the sales, but it's a small off. There's a lot of discussion, and usually when a business changes hands, he's aware of it.
I'm talking about a multifamily, so an apartment.
Okay.
Apartment
Yeah, I mean,
complex, something with 3 units sells, someone's gonna have to follow through on.
That would be easy for the land use technician we could add that to responsibilities when a deed goes through and the assessing database shows that it's a multifamily, that she could contact him and send him an email or whatever.
Yes.
Shouldn't a potential buyer assume that if they're buying something that's occupied, that it's up to standard and there's an occupancy permit already in place? No?
I wouldn't say necessarily, you'd have to know your zoning and
Other
regs
towns do
in the
the same
town.
thing?
Surrounding towns don't do this, to my knowledge, but Manchester does, and they're very diligent about it.
Uh-huh.
So when realtors list a property in Manchester, they make sure that the buyers know prior that you're gonna have to have this as part of the sale. And so that might be a thing that if we pass this, then send something out to all the local real estate offices that, hey, this came into effect. You guys need to make sure that you're aware that when you're doing transactions.
A good practice whenever you buy property in any town, you go into the town hall and you talk to someone and you ask what the zoning regs are and what you need to know before you purchase the property.
But a lot of people don't.
Well, that's
No,
not
they
for a
don't, but-
residential
Huh?
sale.
For any sale.
Most new home buyers wouldn't know that.
But I mean, if you're talking about a multifamily, I would.
A multifamily
On
is
a
different.
duplex,
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily think that I need to redo the
Yeah,
occupancy
I
permit.
know,
No,
it's
yeah,
it's
you wouldn't-
tough. It's-
you wouldn't know that.
buyer beware sometimes.
Isn't it like a catch-all, say, I'm just gonna use the building across the street for example, because it has apartments in it. If Judy owns that, and maybe it's not 100% up to code on maybe electrical, maybe that's got old wiring that needs to be really done, the fuse boxes are old, or, you know, it doesn't have circuit breakers, it has fuses, that type of thing, and Jules is gonna buy it, is that gonna mean that,
No, look, 'cause
to get that repaired, if they, you know, are you gonna be stalling sales
no, because.
where someone's gonna have to fix it, maybe evict, you know, move a
But when
tenant?
when they do a
already
home
a thing.
inspection, that
Yeah.
stuff comes up anyway, and that's usually a contingency in the
Let's say there was
sale,
no
so-
home inspection done, maybe I'm paying
It's
cash.
the state law too, I think.
Yeah.
It doesn't say it's gonna affect the sale of the property, it just says
Right.
that it could, that the town is going to have to issue them a new occupancy permit. And at that point, the town's gonna list all the things that need to be fixed, and the new owner is gonna have to fix them before they can have a permit. It's not saying you're gonna move all the tenants out, it's just
Oh, no.
saying
Mhm.
that they're gonna have so many days to correct the deficiencies and get their permit.
But, I mean, it's not even saying that, but yeah.
But that's the process, right?
Right, yeah, right.
In a way, it makes the multifamilies safer.
Yeah.
I mean, which
Yeah.
is good for everyone.
Because what they're living in an existing unsafe at that point.
And
If
this
there's
is-
something unsafe about it. shouldn't
And this
it
is one way to
be- Okay,
fix
police
these,
that, I get that.
Help them, yes.
I believe when the town dealt last year with the new policy on renting property, that we had heard from the health officer that, and otherwise, that there were some very despicable conditions going on. And I would hate to see any property with some of those conditions being just simply sold and not subject to having to bring the property up to code. I really do.
And that's a very good point, I remember those conversations.
Yeah.
I think there are some
Yeah.
multifamily landlords who don't take a lot of pride in their properties, and I think this helps fix that. So I think it's a good one.
Anyone else?
Make a motion to present amendment number 5 on the ballot as written.
I'll second it.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? And any abstentions? Presented to vote. Amendment 6. 306. Are you in favor of the adoption of Amendment 6 as proposed by petition of the voters of Tilton for the town zoning ordinance as follows? Amend Article 6 to replace the term adult care facility with the term residential adult care facility and designate such as use as not permitted in the rural agricultural district. Replace the term adult care facility from Article 6(1)(b)(6) with the term residential adult care facility and designate such use as permitted in MUDNRC GC districts, allowed by special exception in VRMRIN districts and not permitted in RG and RA districts.
So this one, we don't vote on.
Yes, we vote just whether we think it's a good idea or not. You know,
Oh,
underneath
we
it on the ballot, you
endorse
see
it?
suggested,
Yes,
yeah.
okay,
So that's, and I think
Shows
it's
if we
awesome.
support it or not, correct?
right, okay.
You have to hand it there first.
Hello.
Does residential actually mean single home, family home residential?
Zoning term.
Because
Yeah, but-
I'm aware of a problem that when adult care facilities have several people in it and they apply for a free telephone, only one resident in the house is allowed to have it if it is termed a residential building by the town. No one else in the building can have a free phone. So I don't know if that matters to this issue or not.
I don't think it does. This is a definition.
Yeah, well, these companies go to the towns to find out what type of building these people are living in. And it's very difficult for them to explain the fact that they are in an adult care facility, not a residential single-family home. phone except one person at the address.
I don't think this is saying that it's a residential, single family. It's
Good.
saying it's an adult care facility that people live at.
Yeah.
That's the
So
residential.
my fault,
term.
I've just heard that word
Yeah.
residential so many times, I'm not sure. Thank
It's
you.
quite already.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have, in each of the other amendments, there was a why the change. Does that appear on the ballot?
The why the change, yes.
Yes, it does.
No?
I don't think so. It appears in the, well, last year it was in the town report, but the
Sure.
actual on the ballot it is not.
I believe they hang
Outside the.
outside,
Yes.
as you walk in, they
You
hang
you
signs.
handed them
that-
out last year. You were at a table handing these out.
Yes, right. Or the
But
year
it's not on the
before.
ballot, I don't believe.
Yeah, I don't think so.
And would the town so would such a thing appear relative to this amendment?
A why the change?
And if so, who would the author be?
I don't think it would.
Because it's submitted by petition.
Okay. So just-
Oh, you're saying, so if there was, like, if this document is handed out at town meeting, or at, yeah,
Voting.
what, is that what you're asking?
So you just described that for the other amendments, there'll be a big sheet that somebody might study before they went to.
Yeah.
Well, I think all of these are just hung,
Oh,
like,
Separately.
yeah, because I remember some of yours, maybe, you're the,
I believe last year they were put out in the
Right.
lobby. I don't believe they were put inside the polling place, but out in the lobby along with copies of all the ballots. They have the explanations of all the warrant articles, and I do know that Dari in the past have been there to have additional sheets to pass out. So, I mean, if there was some sheets that needed to be passed out, I'm sure we could arrange to do that before people voted.
I think yours would say, as submitted by petition article, so they know that it's submitted by the taxpayers and not by the
board.
planning board trying to clean up their planning and zoning things, basically.
Yeah.
It would say by petition article, so,
I think
And
it's
it
just
would,
posted.
it would have either
Yeah.
recommended or not recommended.
Correct.
by us at the bottom,
Yeah, that's what we're
yes.
doing now is
Dari was there.
recommended
That's
not.
what we're doing now, there'll be the one line at the bottom saying recommended or not recommended by.
Yeah.
Would there be anything wrong
No coffee.
with having that added to it?
Yes,
Or is
we can.
it- would there
I
be-
don't think you can at this point.
Well, I don't know, because if the planning board is, say you guys vote, I don't know what's gonna happen, but assume, let's say the board votes to stand behind it, then what, I guess I'm asking rhetorically, like, I don't know the answer. What would be wrong with the board, adding to this sheet that they've produced why they support it, why they think the change is a good change?
Or give the opportunity to the petitioners, just as the board suggests an amendment that gets voted on, and then includes a why the change. Why wouldn't it be, in a sense, symmetrical to have the petitioners have their language, and then
why
No,
the-
I
I
don't
think
know.
we have to
I'm
check
not
though,
saying-
because it's already been submitted. You submitted this
Right.
without that verbiage already. It's done.
And these are the public hearings on
So-
it, and we have to have so many public hearings.
Yeah, so we'd have to check.
But you
as
could
far as-
certainly
So
have
I
a
guess
table
I would-
outside the voting area in the hall.
And you can speak to the issue as well.
Well, is the ballot before the open?
Yeah, it's
meeting?
before,
So you won't be able to speak.
no.
So if-
But he could have a table out in the hall, couldn't
But my
he?
But if the
Talk
board,
about it.
if the board could clarify that ahead of time, whether or not it's whether that's an open possibility for the petitioners to have the, why the change appear in the material that is distributed to the
Right.
voters.
How
I've
can we
never,
get
I've
that?
never seen that on petition articles, just the fact that it's a petition article is usually all I've seen is submitted
Yes.
by petition.
If you read the
Don't know.
law that permits petition article, I think it does allow for the planning board to make non-substantive changes to the wording.
I would definitely.
Could you
look
look into
up.
that for us, Dory?
Well, I guess the issue is time. It would almost seem to me that if we were to leave tonight with sort of an agreed upon why the change, and you voted that you accepted to go in this informational document, think that could work. So the issue is pulling something together here and now. I don't know, I mean, you know, why the change?
To clarify the definition of.
Did you have some thoughts?
Well, what I was going to say, just as part of the discussion, to urge you to recommend passage was that it clarifies what the board has already done functionally about what was the interpretation of adult care facility. So in prior actions, something that fell under the term adult care facility was a residential adult care facility. So this wording clarifies that. Secondly, by prohibiting it in the rural agricultural zone, it makes the residential aspect consistent with the other zoning rules on residential use in the rural agricultural zone.
Darry, are we on a slippery slope when we start talking about something that we've done?
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
I don't think we should.
You can take that
I
part
agree
out.
with that. You know, the second part of what Mr. Mead just said, you know, that seems possible, like to say, you know, to bring sort of consistency, you know, why the change? To bring consistency to what is what is and what isn't permitted in the RA district, something like that.
Okay.
Would be.
Yeah, and that,
Okay. I don't want to talk about past
No,
Yeah.
that wouldn't-
things.
Right, yeah.
It's a slippery slope.
It has to be in general.
I know when you get to the actual Saturday part of town meeting, on warrant articles, it states whether the Board of Selectmen or the planning, or the Budget Committee have support or approved that. And I don't know if this is voted to be supported by the planning board,
That's
if
what we're
that's
doing
allowed
now.
to vote.
Yeah, that's
That's what we're going to determine.
That's a great idea.
no, that's- So basically, if we say
Haley, no, I should-
clarifies the definition of residential adult care facility while bringing consistency to permitted uses in the RA district.
Did you write that down? Or
Yes.
Okay, so if I could get that from you.
She was just reading it.
Also,
That one didn't come out top of my head, Val.
I want to add, also keeping with consistency of our master plan, because it's stated in our master plan that residential
We can't, no, they don't.
districts,
Our master plan isn't up to date, so we can't.
but we have a master plan.
It seems to me everyone is kind of in agreement on some phrases. Well,
I don't want to add master plan. I
No.
think that completes it. But you guys
That
can
is
talk about.
specifically stated in the master plan.
Mhm.
I looked it up, that the residential district should be, you know, keeping with agriculture. It should be what you think of as a agricultural, typical agricultural district, sort of spelled out. That's why I thought we would put that in, because we are supposed to be sort of using that as a guide. But we don't have to put it in. Any thoughts?
I think the important thing is that the board recommends the adoption.
Sometimes the less words, the better, so the voters don't.
Yeah, that's
See
true.
too
Then
much.
we'd have
If
to
they just see what
we'd
it
have to
is.
Refer to it, okay.
What did you have do?
Why the reasons, or why the change, clarifies the definition of residential adult care facility while bringing consistency to the permitted uses in the RA district.
Okay. Is that a motion?
Sure.
It does leave adult care facility, non-residential, daycare undefined.
We have to work on that with our definitions.
Yes,
correct?
you do.
Yeah.
That's on our list of things to do.
Right.
We have a lot of definitions to work on.
We have already addressed that, and started to address that in prior meetings. But, so that was a second?
Well, what's the motion, sorry?
Well, Judy read it, and that was, I said, is that a motion? She said yes.
So a motion to use that as why the change statement?
Correct.
I'll second it.
I already seconded it.
Who made the motion?
I mean, sorry,
Okay, I'm sorry.
if we're up for discussion, it seems that the order that you guys discussed was to determine whether you're gonna recommend it, and then
Oh,
when you
okay.
decide you're gonna recommend
So-
it, then to add a why the
Yeah.
change.
So back
So
up.
we need a motion to recommend it first.
Right. I make motion to recommend it.
I'll second that.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? All right. Now, we'll be voting on
The why the change.
the why the change, which is it clarifies the definition of residential adult care facility while bringing consistency to permitted uses in the RA district.
Perfect.
And
Wait, I just have a question. Repeat the very beginning part of that,
It clarifies the definition of residential adult care facility.
because isn't the definition adult care facility that we're bringing definition to? By adding residential?
What was your question again?
Because you're saying, repeat what you just said that when you
It
started.
clarifies the definition of residential
But we
adult
don't
care
have a
facility.
definition of residential, we're adding that to the.
That's what they're asking us to do by this warrant article, by this petition warrant.
That's what this would do, and
But
this is
isn't
why
isn't
they're
the
asking.
Isn't the amendment looking to clarify adult care facility?
No, with the term
No,
residential.
because we're getting rid of adult care facility. That's being replaced out of the verbiage.
Right, but this is why we're doing the change. The reason for the change is to update the definition of adult care facility to include the word residential.
So it's more of an update.
Instead of clarification, we can put
Yeah.
update the definition
I'm just,
Okay. To
or define residential.
differentiate between.
To clarify, works.
To clarify, well, I like.
Question,
I'm
are
gonna
you
go.
adding the word residential in front of the words adult care facility?
Yes.
Yes,
Then that's the change itself, right? Have you voted on that yet?
Yes.
We
yes,
voted to
we
recommend
we
it.
voted to
So
recommend
now
this.
all you're doing is clarifying it.
We're clarifying the definition, which hasn't been.
Like Eric makes a good point, right? You're not clarifying the definition of residential adult care facility because you didn't actually define it for one thing, and you changed it to that. You didn't clarify.
Right.
So what,
It is confusing. I liked what Mr. Mead said, to clarify the interpretation, how we're interpreting the whole business in general, just keep it really vague.
may I?
Yes.
What if you drop that sentence and just say why the change to bring consistency to what is permitted and,
Yeah.
all right?
All right,
That's
so-
perfect.
Yeah.
You want us to revote that, or we have a motion to drop that? Yes.
Yes.
I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like
Nice
this.
and clear. Consistent.
Everybody knows.
That makes it cleaner. There you go.
All right. All right, that's it.
Okay. Does that work?
You're gonna leave us now, aren't you? Nobody ever comes, then they leave us. Thank you, folks, for coming. Appreciate it.
Sit in one position too long.
Thank you.
Oh, really?
More protein.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Protein is very important. This is not protein at all.
Oh, yes, yes.
This is not protein.
Yeah.
Oh,
I apparently, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you guys get signed in here? Okay, good. Yeah, she's actually, very, very happy to have her, definitely, yeah.
This is Ina's daughter, and what's her name? Virginia Merrill. Virginia.
Merrill, is there any relation to the Merrills?
Yes, sorry, yes.
Larry,
Yes,
other business is 267 Main.
yes, correct. Yes.
I know Richardson, not Anna Gardner. And part of the saving plan. Well, it was very good at being out there, snow blowing on the day when I thought it was too cold. I think the day was 55 degrees. She's a lower.
Please do, that'd be great.
Yes, ma'am,
Thank you, appreciate it.
do it before they get the stuff printed.
Yes, that would be nice too. Thank you, appreciate that.
This goes on to the will there be a second hearing, or are you done?
Doesn't look like it's necessary. Second hearing is required if there are substantive changes made. It looks like all the changes made were like changing a couple words on amendment 1. Is that it?
Yeah, and adding that we support.
Right. So I think the second hearing will not be necessary. What's that? Yeah.
Oh, come on over.
Come on over.
I'm going to dog training, you can come.
Dog training?
For her dogs.
Pardon? You ready? Nova Scotia duck tolling retriever. She's beautiful. She's a great.
I saw the construction equipment.
Fresh, sassy.
Yeah, he said
I did 2 dogs.
Yeah.
that they were.
Yeah. I mean.
The question is that because we had that whole thing about the testing of.
Yeah.
Yes.
They shouldn't.
Actually.
Yeah. There's no snow dump.
That's now supposed to be a My Box rental.
So that's what the construction equipment, there was a
Thank you.
GMI
Thank you.
backhoe in there today?
No, GMI is asphalt,
Yeah, but they do everything.
site work.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, down next to Coffee Country Club in what they call Mountain Green Development, they did all the sewer pipes, paving, everything. Oh, yeah. You know who owns that, right?
Barry, this is
No,
where we might have a,
the guy who owns M&B.
that might spark something.
Yeah, and he also bought out that place in Franklin.
I knew they
Edmonds.
sold it, but I thought he sold it.
Edmonds and GMI are all owned by,
I'll
yes.
make my comment, but I think
I know that because he told me so. Yes, he owns all that stuff.
changing to residential doesn't.
The one across the street that went from 2 storefronts to,
It's, if
To
you
a
add,
residential.
go to 3, if you go above 2, you could require site plan review.
the one across the street went from a storefront to a residential. You had to come in.
Probably should require site plan review. Because
Treat everybody the same.
basically, governing the review and approval or disapproval of site plans for the development or change or expansion of use of tracts of non-residential uses or for multi-family dwelling units which are defined as structures containing 2 or more units. So changing to a residential use or creating a residential use doesn't trigger site plan review. No, per se, right, yeah.
And how do we make sure the fire department and everybody has been notified?
I think I would say, make it very clear that, if you were to say, if the planning board were to say to someone, we don't feel you need site plan review, however, we want to make sure you understand, and you can even, make a comment to me saying, planning board will make it very clear that this person does need to obtain a certificate of occupancy, which requires, fire department inspection and whatnot.
Okay.
Are you aware, everybody aware where this space is? It's the first building here, where next, the right-hand side of Clock and Tattoos.
Okay. Used to be like a tea or coffee shop or
Yes.
something.
Okay. The first building, do you know where
Yes.
we're talking about?
Tattoo place used to be,
Correct.
I do.
Would you like to give us a brief overview of your plan?
If you're ready.
Yes.
I've run Touch of the Master's Hand Studio in past years, and I'm looking for a good location to reopen it. The typewritten pages is the goal sheet or the proposal of what I would be doing there. The first 2 paragraph typewritten sheets explain basically what I do. The last sheet will give you a quick overview along with the diagram of what, easier to read, in other words, of what I would do. I've been to the 3 men in the town, which is fireman Al and Dari, and made this, what enhancements, I know that's not your word as
That's
the
okay.
town, the enhancements that would need to be done that the 3 men told me in order to do what it is that my proposal says. So I'm well aware of that. Would be an art gallery, frame shop, because I have access to frame companies as Michael does, by what I was taught by Plymouth State College when I was in school, and art galleries where you have to hang work. There would be separate departments inside the business other than the frame shop, and Al said he thinks that, of course, he calls them different businesses inside. I just call them different departments under the same business name. Printmaking, sewing, crafts, workshops that are both in the arts and cooking classes, and then the gallery itself. So that can kind of tell you, which I told Al, what kind of equipment's going to be in there, chop saw, etc., and whether all of those things are allowed. Basically, most landlords that I've spoken to said that they would prefer not to have wood burning done in their establishment. That makes sense. Because of fire codes, and the firemen told me the same thing. So, and basically what I do is house portraits and other types of commission work for people, along with the framing. And also give discounts to veterans, disabled people, and try to incorporate some low-income disabled people to hang their artwork in there and to come in and learn framing or a trade or something of that experience for them, so they can move on and get a job if they've had difficulty acquiring a job even as a disabled person. So it's helpful to them. I've also taught young high school students that are not going to graduate from high school different arts and turn in a grade to the high school. They might want the summer class. If they're not going to graduate, they might want a winterim class. And the classes that I teach are up to snuff with the high schools, so that the child gets some sort of requirement met that they didn't while they were in school. Sickness, whatever reason that they couldn't do that. This was at the Plymouth school that I did. So it benefits everybody. You don't have to pay the prices that Michael's charges for framing, because I have access to them in bulk, and bulk pricing for art workshops. Mother, daughter, father, son, etc., which helps. I have the backing so far of some local churches who would already like to put some of their artwork in, that are artists in the churches, craftsmen, and backing on whether we would use that space or not for them as artists to come in and teach different workshops. So it kind of looks like a busy hub, which surprised me that Al said it was big enough to do all that.
Does the board have any questions? Oh, sorry.
Yeah. For the frame shop, are you gonna be cutting glass, which is typical
That is a good question.
frames?
You know Billy next door, the hardware store.
Yeah, the hardware store, yes.
He has access to glass, and he has told me that he will do what is called the huge pieces, large pieces, and if I cut any, I am confident in 5x7s. That's it. But it won't be done in a class setting. I will show them how it's done by a demonstration, if allowed. But if I don't, meaning if the town doesn't want me doing that, I can always just show them the tools of what's necessary to use, and they can go over to Billy to buy their glass, or I will get it from Billy, whatever the town requires. Because the fireman already told me that my chop saw really shouldn't go in the basement because there's no venting.
Because of
Chop saw for the wood.
the dust and...
And the dust and everything involved in that, so I've tried to tell him everything so that I don't get caught in there doing something that isn't quite right.
My concern with the chop saw would be the noise, because you have residences upstairs.
If it was on a regular basis, meaning I'm never going to be as big as Michael's, the chop saw, if the town would prefer that, can sit there unused until it's needed by a customer. Or if a customer needs it, I can explain with just demonstration that this is the type of chop saw that you need to purchase.
Probably the type of thing you and your landlord could work out.
Correct, because the frame companies that I work with will either send it pre-cut or not pre-cut, depending on what the customer wants. I can sell the footage not pre-cut and tell them that they have to require their own chop saw, even though I'm showing them how to measure, plan, and get the pencil
You
marks
probably
on
work that out with the
wood.
landlord.
Yeah, but I could see that that would be questionable. Because I said to Tim, I said maybe I could use it in the backyard, but at least it's there for them to see that this is a possibility. The other thing we discussed was a large picture or a computer image of what a chop saw is. So yeah, good point.
I think we're getting a little away from
Yeah.
what we're trying to do. With
Sorry.
that's to determine if we're gonna require a site plan on this, but I have a recollection question, and I'm
Yes.
having a little deja vu here, that at one time we had someone that perhaps wanted to put something similar on Main Street.
Same lady.
Same.
It was our,
Oh,
In the community center with the green awning, that's the resource center. That was the
Yes.
site.
and was gonna live there, and I'm just trying to recall what we required site plan review for that or not.
I do remember having a big discussion about it, and it,
I think you did require site plan review on that one. Do you remember?
I don't, but I do remember the issue was that much more work had to be done in
Yeah.
that location because there's only one bath,
I was
and
gonna
it's
say
not a
this.
shower.
I was gonna say the same thing. There was.
The-
Yeah, sorry.
2 bathrooms in this particular site, one of them is big enough to easily put in a shower. So you don't have to start from scratch to have 2 bathrooms, one for customers and one for me. So maybe that would help, I don't know.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I do recall that there was considerably more reconfiguration that had to be done with the last one.
I'm having kind of a problem with living in a commercial space. Should I not be concerned about that? It just seems a little,
That was my second
That's
thought.
why I
It
was
seems a
surprised
little,
when Al said yes.
I mean, it does,
What did Catherine say?
it does,
Because we just had that problem with clocking it. They were living out back.
well, I
I
mean,
asked him that.
if the planning board were to say, again, I'm not directing, but if, let's say the planning board were to say, well, you don't need site plan review, but you need to, comply with code enforcement officer directives and fire department directives, It seems to me that's their wheelhouse, whether, residential use is compatible with the commercial use and whether the firewalls or whatnot are sufficient.
But this is a commercial space, it's not set up for a residence. What would be the difference of somebody trying to put a commercial space into their house, into their apartment?
Well, the difference,
Kinda-
I think the difference is site plan review regulations, you're required to do site plan review to change to a business, and you're not required to do site plan review to change to a residence.
This just doesn't
And
sound
I asked
right.
Tim that too, but
Doesn't
now,
sound right.
when Tim told me that one or two windows may have to be put into the back for access by fire code, and the shower being installed, and opening the doorway between the two front spaces, and other, what would you call them?
I'm concerned about what precedent this would be
Yeah,
setting
yeah.
for,
All of a sudden we'll have people living in the backs of all the stores and
No, it's the grandfather clause that allows it.
what
No,
grandfather's
there's no
not.
Grandfathered, it's brand new.
brand new.
So you have nothing
Okay, well,
that you're
Tim and I talked
grandfathered.
about the fact,
Who's Tim?
Tim Jubert.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say his last name.
He's not on the planning.
No, he's not on the planning board, so.
But, yeah, he's talking about the fire.
But
Because you can only do it in a space that's big enough to do it. No other spaces can be changed unless it's big enough, meaning I can't do it on the second floor in an apartment because there's not an egress from front to back that's straight, so I can't have customers on a second floor apartment. So there's all kinds of rules that protect the town, that Tim was trying to tell me.
Okay.
Most places,
Yes, Dory.
if I owned a bookshop, I can't live in the back of it and do my business in the front.
Says who?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if
I mean, I'm not saying that what you're saying is wrong, I'm just
Okay,
asking
okay.
under whose authority, under what regulation are you not allowed to do that?
It's not
that's,
included
if
in
they
space.
happen to spend the night, that's not a,
Let's spend the
Well,
night's
wait a
different than.
Are you is the concern that there are gonna be, like, people are gonna be walking into stores on Main Street and there's gonna be like beds and stuff and like couches
No,
in
I'm
those
just-
stores?
I'm looking at precedent, what precedent are,
What's
Wait,
the, what's
is
the
there-
stop? What's the stop from somebody saying they're opening a coffee shop and they put a bunch of couches in there, and next thing you know, people are sleeping on the couches?
oh.
Because it's not approved for residential use.
Well, this one's not either.
It
That's
will
why
have,
I'm here.
I'm saying you would require that she obtain approval through code and fire.
So that sounds like site plan, to be fully vetted.
Okay, but that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, let's suppose you said, we don't feel you need site plan review, it's not a change of use that amounts to a requirement of site plan review. However, if you want to establish a residential use in that building, you are going to have to obtain a certificate of occupancy from code and fire. That's sort of what I was saying. It's up to you, obviously, whether you want to require site plan review.
what's gonna stop me from coming in, opening up Eric's coffee shop, putting a bunch of couches in there, one of those couches happens to be a sleeper sofa.
You're not allowed to.
The
And
fire
it's against
department
the
will
law,
stop
that's what
you.
would stop you.
Yeah, the fire department would also stop you if the egress and
I have,
exit.
I have a door out the back, I have two windows out the back.
And a
You'd
bathroom.
be
It's
put out
against-
just
I don't
like
know.
those people were out of
Don't we have
the tattoo parlor.
regulations on that? Downtown and that?
Wait, these aren't necessarily zoning regulations. You're not allowed to just go live in any building.
Well, that's what she's doing.
No, that's why.
Not without
I
obtaining a
can't do it
certificate
without
of
you.
occupancy. You see, you're asking me, what's to stop someone from just going and living in their business? And I'm telling you the answer, that they're not allowed to. It's against the law.
That's why they were put out of the parlor.
So
And
you,
in this case, if you said you don't need site plan review, you wouldn't be making it legal for her to just go live there. She still needs to secure a certificate of occupancy
so
in
it's
order
two
to do
separate
so.
issues. It's two separate issues.
I think. So,
It just seems kind of weird to me, and I'm not trying to be difficult. It just seems, this is kind of a weird
Yes.
weird request. And
Yes.
it's just, I don't want to set a precedence. So but we're keeping it separate. So you're saying one issue is a certificate of occupancy and the other is, does she need site plan? For the
Mhm.
business part of it.
Right,
So separate the two.
Yeah.
Okay. I still think it's really weird.
Well, and again, yeah, to sort of drive home what you're
I
saying
don't
is,
mean, I don't mean her business or her ideas, I just mean the way it's coming together in this
Well, it's
building.
different.
I
Also, in light of the fact that they did just put somebody out.
It's just a different request from anything I've ever seen, so
I would lean, personally, I would lean towards the fact that she would need site plan review because of the residential aspect of it, because this way we can say that these are the things that need to be done to that site. It kind of puts it in writing, I think.
Yeah, I think as long as she follows the fire codes, I think it's, I mean, I know people get antsy about people living in their business spaces, but I think that's kind of traditional, kind of old school business, that people would do that. And some, not in the front, obviously, but
The man,
in the back or above, that's pretty common.
I don't know if I agree with that, because I've never seen it.
the man that used to own the
How it
bookstore
always is done.
did live in the back of it. What, nobody remembers his name, do they?
Mr.
George
Mansfield?
Mansfield.
No, he lives in
No, the
Franklin.
man before that.
That was George Mansfield. And then he sold it to the
Older,
other
yeah,
gentleman.
the older gentleman
Yes.
that had to retire.
Yes,
Yeah.
He lived in Franklin.
he's still in Franklin.
Yeah.
He lived in the back of the community resource center. Isn't that right, Derry? I thought that's what you looked up in the books.
I don't
You don't
recall.
remember?
No.
All right, so.
Yeah.
What was in this space before this?
most recently it was a tattoo parlor.
Previous,
You were
there was a
correct
little-
about when you said they just put someone out of.
Previous, there was a little coffee shop. at
Are
one
there any regulations associated with the cooking class aspect of it? Anything that we have to be involved in with that?
It'd have to meet all
I mean, does it
state
have to meet
codes.
state codes? Does it have to be certain
I have
setup?
a letter
I mean,
from the state that I received when I was doing the other building.
Sewer,
And
Yeah.
also the type of stove and setup you have to have.
I mean, from a site plan standard.
Yeah, I don't think we have, I think that came up last time when we went around, we talked about schooling and is it a school and all this sort of
well,
stuff.
then, well, I mean, you have, based on this, you have the business part of it happening and the residential part of it too.
Well, then, you know,
Because this is
what
the
is a
kitchen you're
school?
using to live? This is part of your
It
living
says cooking
space?
classes.
Well, I know, but just because you teach,
Once I get in there and
Is it-
see
is it all
what
business?
it looks like, I
I
would have to
teach
find out.
people at my business, it's not a school. So
Okay,
it's
good.
not,
But you're not living there.
that's a different issue though.
No, this isn't her living space.
I know, but we're talking about, should we, all right, what are you proposing then?
Site plan.
Because,
You're intermingling, I mean, based on this diagram, I'm assuming that her residential part of it, and I just,
You're meshing the whole thing is the other word I use.
right, I mean, we can do site plan it.
I would like to make a motion that we require site plan. There's too much unknowns.
You know what, I think we did agree to site plan it last time.
So I have a motion.
I'll second that motion.
All right, any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Yeah.
Aye.
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 So all in favor?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just, it's.
And should I have
Decided
mentioned
last
this before you did your motion, but maybe this encompasses it, your motion encompasses this. UNH Cooperative may want to also teach some cooking classes there. I've been in
That's-
touch with them.
Yeah, that's great, but.
Okay.
That's great. It
All right.
doesn't change anything, but that's great.
Good.
I mean, it'd be
All right.
great if you could make this if this works and it's a great,
And help the low-income
Oh,
people
sure.
economically, et
Yeah.
cetera.
it's,
Plan meals.
but we do want to have site plan.
That's fine, dear. I just want to make sure I don't
Yeah.
say something that's going to get me caught once
No.
I'm in there. I want to say it as much now as I can.
No. It's all good.
I figure putting all the cards on the table is a lot less stress
Yes.
now than later.
And I think that's what we want. We want to have a really good understanding of it and
Yeah.
make sure it works for you.
You have to,
Do you have any other business this evening?
No.
Motion to adjourn?
Oh, he forgot to tell us we have to help him take the Christmas tree down.
We can do that tomorrow.
We have a motion to adjourn.
Oh,
Do we have
we
a
do?
second?
Sure, second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Always second that.
Oh, we need
Sorry.
Are you done with this one?
Yeah.
Reading that one, or-
You can,
Okay,
we can.
fine. I didn't know if you didn't like
Yeah.
it.
Throw all that stuff out.
I know, I usually go through it. It's funny, this morning on Facebook.
Yeah, I know. It seems like a bad idea. Eric's actually on.
Hubby's leaving right now.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so there's that one right there.
But I did post it. and it's right on. So I've had this binder now for 5 years, Dory. I'd like to put in for another one.
Okay.
Yeah,
What's
we have
that?
a new year, we should get new
I think
binders.
you should
Oh,
take
yeah.
better care of your things.
No, I don't think he likes me at all.
Tim couldn't hear you.